Asterisk, let your breathing settle gently as we drift back to the drifting mists of medieval Europe, into an age shaped by rival kings, restless ambitions, impossible victories, and devastating losses. For this is the story of the 100 Years' War, a long and tangled struggle between England and France that began not with swords drawn, but with old bloodlines entwined across centuries, when kings married queens. Territories shifted hands, and dynasties rose and fell, until claims to thrones became tangled like threads in an ancient tapestry. And as you relax, let your eyes slowly grow heavier. Imagine the soft echo of distant hoofbeats, carrying us toward the early 1300s, when the House of Capet ruled France, yet produced no direct male heir to secure the line, leading nobles to reach for the closest branches of the royal tree, dismissing the English king Edward III despite his mother being a French princess, a decision that sowed the earliest seeds of resentment. And as the new French king, Philip VI, ascended the throne, tension simmered quietly under the surface, like embers waiting for the slightest wind to ignite them. And that wind came in 1337 when disputes over Gascony and the French crown awakened Edward's claim, transforming political rivalry into open conflict, marking the beginning of a war that would stretch across generations, reshaping Europe in ways no one could foresee. And so our peaceful drift through time now follows the soft stirrings of armies preparing for battle, archers stringing their longbows, knights fastening armor, banners fluttering in the breeze as England's armies, smaller but more disciplined, sailed across the Channel, while France's much larger forces gathered with confidence drawn from numbers. Yet battles are seldom decided by size alone, and the English, guided by Edward III and his bold young son, the Black Prince, unleashed a revolutionary weapon, the English longbow, a simple yet powerful tool crafted from yew, capable of piercing armor and sending storms of arrows across fields before enemy knights could close in. And at Crécy in 1346, under clouds thick with tension, those arrows rained down like a deadly storm, cutting through French ranks and fracturing their morale, turning what should have been an easy French victory into a crushing defeat. And as the fallen knights lay scattered in the grass, the soft winds of history carried England one step further toward dominance, culminating in the long siege of Calais, where townspeople endured starvation and unbearable suffering until finally surrendering, and Edward placed English settlers there to secure the region, weaving a new thread into the vast tapestry of white Europe. The Black Death, the terrible plague that claimed countless lives, halting campaigns, emptying villages, silencing battlefields, and reminding both sides of the fragile nature of life itself. And as we quietly drift through this period of pause, imagine the silent streets, the shuttered markets, and the way the world itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the return of conflict that everyone knew would eventually resume, for peace in this era was like a thin sheet of ice, cracking under the slightest weight. And when hostilities ignited once more, the Black Prince emerged as one of the war's most formidable commanders, leading daring raids across France, known as chevauchés, burning fields, capturing towns, and forcing the French crown into uncertainty until the famed Battle of Poitiers in 1356, where French King John II was captured, a humiliation that shook France to its core and shifted the balance of power dramatically toward England. Yet even in victory, the English could not secure lasting peace, for France, resilient and deeply rooted in its land, rallied under younger leaders, new strategies, and shifting alliances, while internal divisions, economic strain, and political disputes weakened England from within. And as we glide calmly through these turbulent decades, you can imagine the countless soldiers marching, the clatter of armor muffled by distance, the soft crackle of campfires at night, knights whispering prayers before battle, and peasants far removed from royal ambitions suffering under the shifting tides of war, their lives shaped by conflicts they never chose. And when the Treaty of Retigny in 1360 offered a temporary halt, granting England vast territories in exchange for renouncing claims to the French throne, it seemed for a moment that calm might settle over the kingdoms. But as history often shows, peace built on unsettled disagreements rarely lasts. And as the years quietly passed and old kings died, young ones rose, some wise, others rash in France, under King Charles V and his brilliant commander Bertrand du Guesclin, slowly reclaimed lands lost to England, turned the tide through strategy rather than brute force, avoiding open battles where English longbows excelled. Instead, wearing down English garrisons through harassment and patient sieges, demonstrating that even the most formidable enemy can be weakened through time, persistence, and resilience. And as England's fortunes faded, internal unrest grew, with political strife, infighting among nobles, and economic decline reducing their former strength. Yet the war did not end, for the threads of destiny continued weaving toward one of the most extraordinary figures in history, a young peasant girl from Domremy, Joan of Arc, whose visions and voices inspired her to lift France from despair, a girl who believed with unshakable certainty that God had chosen her to save her country. And as you breathe deeply, imagine the quiet countryside where she grew up, fields swaying the wind, and her simple life transformed by divine purpose, leading her to persuade the Dauphin the future, and though dismissed at first, her determination and sincerity eventually convinced him to give her command of troops. And at Orleans in 1429, Joan's presence electrified the French, turning exhaustion into courage, driving the English away in a victory so shocking that it revived hope across the entire nation. Her victories continuing until Charles was crowned king at Reims, a moment that symbolized France's rebirth. Yet Joan's light, though powerful, burned tragically brief, for she was captured by Burgundians, sold to the English, put on trial, and executed at the stake in 1431. A young woman barely 19. Yet her martyrdom became a rallying cry that carried France to eventual triumph. And as we drift to the final decades of the war, England's resolve crumbled, their territory shrinking until only Calais remained, and in 1453, the Battle of Castillon marked the definitive end of England's continental ambitions, closing a conflict that had lasted not exactly 100 years, but 116, a stretch so vast that generations were born, lived, and died under its shadow. And as the last echo of battle fades softly into the distance, imagine a quiet dawn rising over France, fields once filled with knights and archers now returning to quiet farmland, castles once battered by siege engines slowly rebuilt, and the weary people finally stepping into an era of peace, carrying with them the lessons, scars, and stories of war that reshaped medieval Europe forever. And as this long tale gently settles in your mind, let it guide you into deeper rest, knowing that every age, no matter how turbulent, eventually finds calm, and every war, no matter how long, eventually gives way to silence. And in that silence we can breathe, reflect, and drift peacefully into sleep.